maybe my favorite thing to talk about ever with respect to the onboarding process or the pre-boarding process. And that is, we see a lot of organizations that leave a lot on the table during the pre-boarding process because they don't double down on individualization. So here's the reality. We as human beings, we crave being known and recognized as unique people. This is even more true of younger millennials and Gen Z employees who are rapidly entering the workforce. It's true of everybody. So we don't want to just put people in boxes, but we do see some interesting, even generational differences, that the process of individualization and customization is incredibly important for people. So when you are thinking about pre-boarding, we hope that you will, whether it's you as kind of the lead or you mobilizing, hiring managers or other departments right here doing hiring, however your organization does it, that you're equipping them to do really good individualization. When I say individualization, what I mean is that if I've just hired Joy and she signed on the dotted line, that I am doubling down on messages that are so unique to her that I wouldn't be able to send them to anybody else, right? And it makes sense. Now, I know that because you're so busy, you're such a busy HR leader, that as we're talking about some of these things, you're immediately thinking, I don't have time, I don't have space for that. How am I supposed to individualize when we're hiring, for example, a lot of employees very quickly, right? There's creative ways that you can accomplish this using, for example, an HRIS. You can build in, unique ways to capture information about what your new hires are interested in, their passions. You can capture even like what are their favorite snack foods, and maybe you've got a budget to buy a packet in M&Ms for an employee on, to present to them on day one. And you have an HR intern maybe who gets to help you collect all these snacks. I'm making stuff up on the spot. My point is,
Ashley has a great, I love it. Ashley said they actually asked for the family sizes, like t-shirt sizes during pre-boarding. And so they have a package of shirts, not just for the new employee, but also their family.
Brilliant. So yeah, the process of individualization. So it's creating opportunities for employees to feel seen and heard, again, as unique individuals. Joy mentioned this earlier, that this is such a crucial component to any DEI conversation, that anytime you're thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, which is beyond the scope of this particular presentation to dig really deep. But what we will say is that we have seen organizations who are just doing a really good job in this area are typically ones that send individualization messages on a regular basis, because that's what you want to hear, is that I'm valued for who I am, for my authentic self, everything I bring to the table, that my, what I bring in way of diversity and diversity of talent is really appreciated. So how can you start building that in? So I want to share with you a research study that was conducted several years ago. So this was actually, it's also talked about in the Culture Code by Dan Coyle. If you haven't read that, it's a wonderful read for really anybody who works in HR or works with people, right? So the Culture Code is what it's called. And they reference this study in that book. So, but this was a study that was conducted in 2013 with a really large, actually manufacturing firm, and they were hiring large kind of cohorts at a time. And they were getting pretty decent feedback about their employee orientation, but they were not retaining employees very well. After about 6 months, they were losing a lot of their employees. And so these researchers went in and they wanted to know, is there something we can do during that pre-boarding and that onboarding phase that will increase retention? So the first thing they did is they had their control group. Their control group is getting kind of that standard orientations, mostly skills training, right? And oh, Ashley shared the link for the Culture Code in the chat.
Thanks,
Ashley is brilliant as always. Now, again, I've lost my train of thought. So the control group, right? So they have this control group and they put them through the skills training. And so then they're kind of monitoring baseline retention there. So then they had a group, and that group one, we'll call that group one. Group one was a group where they gave them sort of that standard skills training, but they also gave them an additional hour during that onboarding phase where they went heavy on messages about company culture and a collective identity. So who are you joining? As who are we as an organization? What's our vision, our mission, our values? What are we about here? They shared a lot of stories about successes they'd had in their communities, ways that they'd served locally. They gave those new employees swag, like company swag with really nice logo on it, and they wanted to see, does that increase retention? So that's group one. Group two, they thought, what if instead of focusing on collective identity during that onboarding process, what if we focus on individual identity and expression? And so for that second group, they gave them the basic skills training, onboarding, orientation stuff. But then in their extra hour, instead of putting the focus on the company and the company culture, they put the focus on the individual and the value that the individual was bringing to the team. So they got the organization to facilitate these small groups of, so maybe there's 4 or 5 new hires together. And so you could execute something like this even virtually now, right? Which is really cool. But they got them together and they said, okay, Joy, so you're this new hire. Hey, share with us, if you were stranded on a desert island with a team, what skills and talents would you bring to the table that you think could help your team survive? Now you might hear that and think that's weird. Why would you ask that question? But it is insane how much people love to talk about and express themselves in that way. And so what happened was when they put the focus on the individual and individual expression and said, hey, Joy, what are the parts of this new job that you're most excited about? Hey, what are the parts of this new job that make you a little bit nervous? What do you think best aligns with your talents and your strengths? And gave her an opportunity to express that instead of putting the focus on the company. You can see here, spoiler alert, it's been on the screen, right? New employees from group 2 were 250% more likely than those from group 1 to be retained. And I think what's so significant about that is that it's not that those messages about company vision and mission and value are not important. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, right? They're still really, really important. But what mattered more in retention was those messages of individualization. Yeah. So organizations that we see who are doing this really, really well are, again, capturing some data about their new hires and then figuring out ways throughout that pre-boarding process to slow drip, like, I see you, Joy, as a unique person, and here's the unique reasons we hired you and why we're so excited. And you really love M&Ms, or here's how you like your Starbucks drink, or whatever it is. Creating those unique ways to make that person feel seen as an individual. Mm-hmm. We also know that when we just hear our names spoken out loud, it is a dopamine boost for us. I mean, we love the sounds of our own names, and it sounds kind of, again, not narcissistic, but it's true. We love to hear people address us. And so I think the more that we can figure out ways to do that in the onboarding and the pre-boarding process, the better. So that's tip number 3, is that you really want to lean heavily into individualization.
I know a lot of you were sharing some really cool things that you do on day 1. Some of those things could be moved into the pre-boarding phase a little bit. You are running a risk. If you mail them something that is personalized for them and then they don't show up for the job, you did run a little bit of a risk, but the chances of that leading to them staying with the job is actually much more likely.
Absolutely. And the more even that they're getting those customized, just verbal, like free communication, just verbal communication that is individualized and customized to them, the better. The fact that you remember a small thing that was shared in the interview, and maybe again, that's something that you're monitoring electronically and then sharing with hiring managers so that they can facilitate. There's so many ways you can do this, but the overall goal here is individualization. Guess what? It reduces uncertainty and it increases predictability and feelings of stability, right?